I'm Robert Bracey, and the Money and Medals Network is broadcasting to you from the office of Amelia Dowler, the curator for Greek coins at the British Museum. Hello, Amelia.
Hello, everyone.
We're here today because Amelia is the brains behind the Coins and Medals Summer School. This event has just finished for 2013, and we're going to be giving you an extract, one of the lectures, in a few moments. But first of all, Amelia, what is the summer school?
There had been summer schools at the British Museum previously, but the current run of summer schools began in 2009 with a classical summer school, and this was repeated in 2010 and 2011. We had a break last year because of the redevelopment of the Money Gallery. A lot of us were very busy with that. And the summer school returns this year, again with classical elements, so teaching about Greek and Roman coins from first principles. But this year we've also added a medieval element. So the programme this year was spread over 2 weeks. The first week covered classical topics, as we've done previously, and the second week covered medieval and early modern topics.
And so how do people get to come on the summer school? Who's it for?
The summer school is for undergraduate and graduate students. The idea is that they don't necessarily have an opportunity to study numismatics or to incorporate work with coins into their current studies at whichever university they happen to attend. And so this summer school gives them the opportunity to learn about coins. So the typical student is an undergraduate or graduate student with perhaps a little experience with coins, maybe having attended some lectures or a course on numismatics. So this is not a course designed for the advanced students in numismatics. The students are generally archaeologists or historians.
And the Money and Medals Network is going to be broadcasting some of the talks that were given at the summer school over the next year, before there's a summer school in 2014?
Yes, we're hoping to repeat the summer school in 2014. Because this year is the first year we introduced the medieval week, we are currently looking at whether it's the best plan to repeat the entire programme in 2014 with 1 week classical and the second week medieval, or whether it would be better to revert to simply a classical summer school and then perhaps alternate between years classical and medieval. We haven't finalised that plan yet.
And so we're about to have the first of the 3 lectures we're going to broadcast this year, and this is by Dan Pett, and he's talking about databases. Amelia, can you tell us a little bit more about Dan's involvement in the summer school and the session that he did for the students?
Yes, though the summer school is primarily focused on the identification and use of coins within history or archaeology studies, we also want the students to appreciate the different modern tools and techniques that they can use to enable them to study coins further. And Dan taught a session on the portable antiquities scheme and the use of databases for the study of coins, and the kinds of techniques which you can use when looking at a large group of material rather than focusing on individual coins. And this is really very useful for the students to build up a picture of, in this case, the use of coins in the study of Roman Britain and medieval Britain, because the material which has come up through the portable antiquity scheme has really enhanced our picture of what's going on in Britain through the coins of the time.
Okay, and now here's your opportunity to listen to Dan.
Ben's already done the introduction. I work here at the British Museum. I've been here for 10 years and I play with the web. I experiment with various bits and pieces and I do what I want basically with web technology. I use open source tools and I try and build things that are useful to other people. And hopefully what I'm going to talk about might be useful to you, and it might give you some ideas about other websites that could be useful. Martin's website, the EMC, I'm going to mention, but not very much because I think you'll probably talk far more about that. I'm not sure if any of you have had a lecture yet at all about Portal Antiquities scheme. Now, in this country, it's legal to search for antiquities with permission from the landowner. So this is a bit of a scary photo. Does anyone know what this is? What sort of activity is going on here? No, it's not field walking? How many people are in that field? There's around 500. So what they've done is they've paid an organiser, say £10 for the day. They go out in a mass group and the organiser says, go. They all go off and try and find finds. Now, we try and record all these objects. In practicality, it's impossible to record every single object that comes up at these rallies. We don't have to see everything. We perhaps see about 40% of the objects that are found in this country. That is a very optimistic figure of 40%. Not everything that is recovered is going to be that useful to archaeologists. There could be ring pools, there could be farm machinery, there could be all sorts of other things that we don't actually record. Now, we have a cut-off date of 300 years, which coincides with the Treasure Act. So if any of you had to talk about Treasure Act, I'm not sure if you have yet, we don't record things that are younger than 300 years. Now, there's several aims of the Portal Antiquities scheme. This presentation can be found online as well after this, and all the links I'm going to mention in this talk are going to be online as well. I've put them all in a bundle on Bitly so you can actually find them really easily. So we've got some really simple aims for what we do. So we've got 5 aims. We try and promote maximum public interest and benefit from the recovery of the objects. We want to get information, what the object is, what the coins have got on them, and then other academics can go out there and reuse them. So Ben might be looking at a certain coin type. He can come to our database, he can study it and pull out all the find spots and draw a map. He can take them away in a CSV third sheet and do what he wants with them. Now, we're not the only website that does this sort of information, where you can download data and reuse it. But we're probably the biggest in this country. So secondly, the aim is promoting best practice between finders and landowners. Now, when people find objects in this country, it belongs to the landowner. If it's treasure, the reward is paid out half and half to the landowner and the finder, so it encourages people to report objects. Archaeologists, if they find treasure, don't get a reward. The landowner still is eligible for a reward because it's their object, but most of the time, if it's an archaeological excavation, they waive the reward. So we work in partnership with other museums, local authorities, the public, and other professionals. We try and get the most educational value out of these objects so that you can use them for what you want to do with your research. We try and create partnerships between the metal detecting groups. This is Frank Basford, who's the Isle of Wight Finds Liaison Officer. Now, he's about the same demographic age as most of the people he works with. He knows the Isle of Wight off the back of his hand. So if someone finds an object in the Isle of Wight, he normally knows exactly where they found it. And he can pinpoint on a map. He says, well, you must have found it here, because this is what human activities happened there in the past. Now, when he retires, there's going to be a huge brain drain on the Isle of Wight. How are we going to replace him? It's a bit worrying, really. It's the same in lots of parts of archaeology. When someone dies or retires, we have to try and replace the knowledge. But the last aim of the scheme is to support the Treasure Act, and it increases the opportunities for museums to acquire archaeological objects. Now, can anyone guess how many treasure cases there are a year? It's about 1,000. Now, Caroline, who just walked in, used to work in the treasure team and administer this process. Treasure is very emotive. It causes lots of arguments. Finders and landowners can get very heated with us when we value the objects. We commission people to value the objects. We don't actually do it as a museum. So quite often we're misrepresented and we say, or seen in the press, and it says, the British Museum has valued your object at £50 or 3.25 million or just some random figure. It's not us, it's some independent valuers. And the Treasure Valuation Committee sits around a table, much like you're doing now. They look at the evidence and they decide whether the values are fair. Those values are then recommended to the Secretary of State, and if it's accepted, the landowner and the finder get the reward, split 50-50. So how did the scheme come into being? In 1997, after the Treasure Act was passed, 6 pilot centres were set up. I'm going to show you some maps in a minute, and you might be able to work out where those pilot centres were. But there's one in East Anglia, in Norfolk, West Midlands, Hampshire, Wales, and Kent. Then in 2003, the scheme went national. Now, we don't include Scotland. Does anyone know why Scotland's not included in... It's got a different law, yes. So everything that's found in Scotland belongs to the state. It's treasure trove. So they've got a unit there that records all the objects, in theory, that come in. I think there's probably too many archaeological objects happening, so maybe it's not quite working as well as it could do, and the people who work up there are probably swamped with objects. Now, we have 38 members of staff who are recording the objects, and they're swamped with objects. So can you imagine what 2 people up in Scotland are doing? They're probably struggling. Now, every single object that we record goes onto our website, which is finds.org.uk. If any of you want research access after this lecture, just register on the website and then request an upgrade and say why you'd like access. So say you're doing a study in your parish, or like Martin, you're looking at hoarding and various other bits and pieces around the early medieval economy. You can register on our website, you can download data, you can search, you can see what's coming in instantly. So whatever's happening on our website now, those objects are available to you as a researcher. They're coming up in real time. So people are recording every day of the year. Last year, there was not a single day when anyone did not record an object. So even on Christmas Day, people were recording objects. Everything we put on the web is on a very liberal license. I'm going to come back to liberal licensing a bit later in my talk. Now, Creative Commons allows you to assert your copyright over a piece of work, but tell people how they can use that work. So we say by attribution and share alike. So if someone uses our work, all they have to do is say, comes from the Port Antiquities scheme, and they have to share it under the same license. So we're trying to foster an environment where people use our information, but also do the same thing with theirs. So it's sharing it for the greater good of academia. In 2011, we were quite pleased. We won an award, Best of Web conference in America. And this award is usually handed out for the best research collection online. And it's now held by the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. Last year it was run by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and previous year by Victoria and Albert. So this collection is actually quite well recognised by museum professionals around the world as being a useful tool. So this is how many objects are now online. 885,000 objects. Now, I started 10 years ago. There were 33,000 objects online. So that gives you an idea of how quickly things are being recorded. We could no doubt go faster if we had more people, but that's a pipe dream. We're not going to get more people from the government. In fact, they're going to cut us back. So out of those objects, how many are coins? This is what you're really interested in, the coins. Well, there's 300,000 coins in the database, and out of those, 39,000 are medieval. And this just gives you an idea of the temporal spread of objects on our database. Roman objects are the majority, and that's because Roman coins are found a lot more easily, and maybe finders are biased in the way they bring objects in. Now, biases are very prevalent in all databases that you see. The person who's recording objects might know more about Roman objects or medieval objects, so they don't record those things. They perhaps put them aside and wait for someone else to give them a hand. I don't particularly like anything past the Romans anyway. I like early medieval stuff roughly, but I've got a preference for what I like. So that comes out in databases. Most of our staff don't like post-medieval objects, so we don't have that much post-medieval stuff being recorded. Now, going back to that first slide, what were the people doing in that slide? They were metal detecting. What won't you find with a metal detector? You won't find Mesolithic and Paleolithic objects, so we don't have many of those objects being brought in. So that's why we've got a preponderance of metal objects on this database. And coins, because they're easily to find, they account for about 40%. So how many people have actually integrated with the scheme? And this is an important figure. 22,500 people have offered information to the scheme for recording. It's a very high public impact in terms of recording outreach. This could go up, but it's not actually representative of how many people are metal detecting around the country. This is over 13 years. Some metal detectorists have died. Some people have given up. So we estimate there's about 8,000 active metal detectorists in the country. 8 to 10,000 is the estimate that we actually push out to the press. So there's not that much denuding of the archaeological record in terms of 22,000 people out there detecting at one time. And they are sporadic in their hobby as well. So they might go out for one month a year. They might go out every day. We can't actually estimate how often they do go detecting. So what is the point of collecting these data? Well, there's lots of reasons to record these data. If we don't record the data, it's lost. We have one chance probably to record all that information. And if it comes without context, is it useless? Well, no, because we've still got an X and Y coordinate. We might not have a Z coordinate, but at least we can put it on a map. You can draw distribution maps and broad scale maps. This map just shows you where all the coins that are recorded in our database are being found. So you can see we're very dense in certain areas. Now, there's some reasons why things aren't found in certain parts of the country. Down here in Cornwall, who owns most of the land? Does anyone know? Exactly. And he doesn't allow metal detecting on his property. Over here in Wales, why don't we find many objects coming up there? Because of the topography of the land. We've got mountains. I can't imagine many metal detectorists like lugging their detector up a mountain, and maybe they won't find things up there anyway. So this is more about biases about where things are found. You can probably see dense areas on here as well. So if you look down in Kent, we've got a lot of objects being found. That's one of the pilot areas. The Isle of Wight you virtually can't see. But if you look at a much more micro level, you see the objects are much more spread out. So this is just a broad level map. So here you go. This is the Isle of Wight, the distribution of coins from there. I'm not going to interpret this for you. I'm just going to say this is where the coins are being found. The pink ones are the medieval coins, which I think you're interested in as a group. If you want to have a look at this map in greater detail, you can find my presentation afterwards and zoom in. It's actually on Flickr as well, so you can download this map. Has anyone come across the Celtic Coin Index at Oxford? This is an Iron Age dataset, which is quite a good control to see how well we're recording information. Their dataset goes up to 2003, 2004, and since then, they haven't put any more object information online. It's all going onto cards in an index in Oxford. It might go online in the future, but we're not sure what's going to happen at the moment. So, since then, the only records that are going online for Iron Age coins are the red dots, the Port Antiquities ones, which you can see overlain on this map. So, are we having objects brought into us that are coming from different areas? Well, yes, we are, but some of them are perhaps the same object. They've been recorded with the CCI and with us, but they haven't told us that they've recorded them. So we have to look at the coin type and the information and try and weed those out and perhaps harmonise the data. It's quite a big job. So at the moment, it's not being done. So this is potentially a research project for someone to try and record that information. Now this is another data set as well that could be used as a control You can do the same thing with medieval coin types if you can find a database to do this. This is the Iron Age and Roman Coin project from Wales, done by Peter Guest and his colleague Nick Wells. You can see that, again, we've got some coins that weren't in their dataset because their dataset stopped and ours continued, and we've also got a few coins that they didn't know about. So you can add these two datasets together and you can mold them into your own research pattern. Well, that doesn't come out very well. Okay. Well, this is a map of Venetian soldinos. Adam Daubney wrote an essay on this. He's one of our finds liaison officers for Lincolnshire. And he worked out where all instances of the Doges of Venice were found in this country. But since this map was drawn, a lot more have been brought forward. And is that a result of his article being put out into the Treasure Hunting magazine and Current Archaeology? Possibly. Putting things out in popular magazines helps numismatists get recognised. So, you want to play with data, I imagine, and find things to do. Databases are all very well and good, but you can't do very much for yourself in terms of moulding their structures the way you want to do things. So what's really useful for many of you is to download data in one entire set, maybe CSV files. So CSV files are basically Excel tables. You can download one, you can filter it, and you can get the information out in the way that you want to. So from our database, if you want to get all the data in one go, you go to that URL, which is on the screen, but you can't see it at the moment, which is finds.org.uk, database, data. You can download the whole lot, and you can do what you want with it, as long as you attribute the data where it came from. Right, so this is the breakdown of our objects by broad period. This is a little bit old. This is about 5 months old now, this slide. It shows you how quickly the data set is growing. So back then, it's 255,000 objects for coins. Now it's 300,000. So you can see how quickly objects are being recorded. Now, what other factors are there that are causing this to accelerate so quickly? Huge coin hoards are being found. There's the Froome hoard from Somerset, 53,000 coins, which weighs as much as I do, times 2. So, well, I'm lying there. I'm not that heavy. So that can skew the record as well. But how else do we open up recording and make it much more a team effort? How do we crowdsource data from a bigger area? Well, what we've done is we opened up a database to the public as well. We're attracting amateur numismatic specialists, or people who'd like to know more about numismatics, to record data on our database. And this is 2 examples of objects on our database. They're both Roman, I'm afraid. One's recorded by the public member. This is by Lindsay Bedford. One down there is by Frank, the old chap I showed you in the Isle of Wight picture. Now, they are of the same standard. How does she manage to do this to the same standard? Well, she's come here and had training from Sam Moorhead in the basement. She's done quite a lot of reading. She's actually produced a record that is really, really good. That can be used by numismatists, by the public, by anyone else who's interested. Can everyone do this? Well, not everyone's able to do this, but what they can do is they can record an object to a basic level, and then a member of our staff can then go on there, edit the record, improve it, and then push it out and say it's valid for the public to reuse. And this is very similar to the way that museums work. We try and push as much data onto the web as possible. Sometimes it's a very raw format. I'd like you to go and look at the British Museum website after this and search collection and do some searches for coins, and you'll find how bare some of the records are. There's a progressive program to make these better, and unfortunately I think people like Caroline are given the task of data entry to make these better. So they've got the actual first-hand record, which is on card, and they've got to enhance it. It's very similar to the way that we can actually enhance just the picture from the image and the text there. Now, without an image, how do you check that record's valid? It's very difficult to. So we try and record all public records that come in to have an image. For practical reasons, not all records that the finds agents record do have images. Do you want an image of every single grotty Roman coin, or some of the medieval coins? Well, ideally yes, but can you do it? No. So how do we maintain data integrity? Now, you see this in lots of websites out there that actually publish data. You have a process called workflow. It's a way of making data go from one end of the spectrum to the other. So when people put data onto our database, it goes to something called review. You, if you haven't got access rights, cannot see that data. It's then edited, and you think, well, I'm happy for the public to see that now. You push it forward one level, so the public can now see that record, and if they think there's an error, they can comment on it, send a message to our specialists. You can say, that's wrong, please correct it. Once it's been checked by the specialist, either Sam Moorhead or John Naylor, who's the medieval coins guy at Oxford, they make it public with a published sticker on it as well, which means it's been validated. Now, that doesn't mean it's not error-free, but it's been done to the best of their ability, and there might be just some small thing on that record that needs correcting. So I'm just going to run through the anatomy of a coin record now. What are the important parts that we must record when we're doing coin records? Ignore the QR barcode, I'll come back to that. Has anyone seen those before? You see QR barcodes on Coke cans. It's just a way to encode information. And if anyone's not seen one before, I'll show you how it works afterwards. So, like I said earlier, the image is the most important thing, in my opinion. Once you've got the image, you can actually do all the information from that, apart from the weight. You want the descriptions? Every single object must have a unique ID. You must have a unique ID for objects. If you don't, then how do you refer to it online or in publication? So we give them a random string based around the institution that records them. We then want the chronology, the dimensions, who found it, when, where, the numismatic information about that coin, so what's in the obverse and reverse, the typologies that it might come under. And I produce some really high-level maps as well. The public can't see these maps at this full level. Now this map here shows OpenStreetMap data with the outside boundary for the parish. Now how have I drawn parishes on a Google map? I've taken data from the Ordnance Survey and I converted it into something called KML. And there's no other websites out there that do this apart from Google. They've got their own data sets and they paid for them. I did it using open data, free data. So you can actually tell straight away if the coordinates are within the parish that someone's told you. It cuts down on errors that we're finding on our data set. You can also see data on different map players as well. So you might want a satellite image of the field. You just click on the button that says satellite and you zoom in. Now this goes right down to full resolution for academics, but for the public it stops at 1 kilometre squared. So you cannot see the dot on the map and things are obscured. I also convert coordinates into different things. I work out how long the grid reference is for precision. I work out the elevation of the objects on the landscape, so you can do three-dimensional models. It's very easy to do using web services that are out there now. And I also search our database at the same time. I try and find similar objects. So say you as the academic, you're going through this database and you think, have they got any other objects of this type? I'm too lazy to go searching. This does it for you. It gives you 4 examples across the bottom. You can click on any of the headings, it takes you to that record. Now ideally, if you click on that link, the other record will have the record you just came from to show that they're the similar object. It's using an algorithm that I wrote in the background. So it's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. I then also convert images to make them to high-resolution zooming functionality. You might actually want to zoom in on these images and find out if there's striations on the coin or certain mint marks or die marks. You can do this with this code. Now, all the code that I've written to run this database is openly available online. I'll come back to that later on. So in the future, if you ever build a database, you could download some of my code and reuse it for your program. Or you could employ someone else to do the coding for you and say, well, there's code out there already. Don't reinvent the wheel. And these are some of the other things that we're working on now in Portal Antiquities. Right. This is called polynomial texture mapping. This looks like a Death Star cut in half. It's using a camera of flashing lights in this version to take an image of a coin with different light flowing across the image at one time. So you can see shadows and you can make a model online and you can push the light source across the coin and you can see it under different conditions. It's quite useful for working out what degraded coins look like. Now, I think this model is available in the gallery. 69, isn't it? Is it gone now? Okay. So this is computated tomography, which is done in a scanner down in Southampton. This coin hoard was in the pot. We decided we didn't want to excavate it. We wanted to see what the objects were within this coin hoard. You can now see inside objects very easily using this technology. So you can see what the coins look like and how they're put in the pot. So it saves you from excavating them. If you think it's not really worth it, you can see them there. You can perhaps do some identification. If you think about archaeology, all archaeology is destruction. We might not have time or money at the moment to do this properly and conserve it. So doing this type of technology might be useful to you as a numismatist, but you obviously want to see the actual coins coming out of the pot to do the full work, but this is a good start. Right, moving on to databases. How many of you have ever seen any of these websites? Archaeological Data Service, I think most of you might have come across. TDAR? Possibly not. This is the North American repository for sharing data. Open Context, has anyone come across that? This is a very good website that's written by a chap called Eric Kanzer at Berkeley University in California. He's actually pushing data models in a very different way and allows you to publish an entire site data on his website. So let's say you, as a numismatist, direct an excavation in Cambridgeshire or Essex, and you build up a big data set and you want to publish it somewhere, but you haven't got enough money to do it. You could go to Eric and you could say, could you put this on your website and publish it in the format that could be reused by academics? And he'll probably say, yes, but I want it in this format first, which is a CSV spreadsheet. He then takes the data, uploads it, manipulates it, puts it out online. Or you could go down a different route. You could go to the ADS and say, I've got all this data in CSV format. Could you put it on your website? And all they'll do is publish a CSV file and a bit of text interpreting what it's there for. It then becomes up to you outside their walls to reinterpret it in the way you want to. A bit like I mentioned earlier, downloading CSV, reusing it for the format you want to. And so what numismatic databanks are out there? Well, Martin's one, the EMC. All the web links are actually on the last slide of this paper. And then on the left is the CCI. Now, I know exactly how many people are using this, and it's a very small figure academically. There's probably not more than 50 people using this resource, but it's very important for people to have access to this. Ian Lyons, who I don't know if you've met yet, who's based in the basement, he's the curator of Iron Age coins. He's on this constantly. I know when he's on there, because someone's on it for about 3 hours, and they scroll through lots of pages, and they're looking for particular coin types. So you can analyse people's usage of these websites to find out what they're looking for, what they want, and how they're finding stuff. And you can adapt your website to make it better if you follow user paths. So what other resources are out there? Now, who's heard of Europeana? Now, Europeana is a European-funded initiative to amalgamate all of our heritage online in one portal. The Fitzwilliams data goes into this, our data goes into this, British Museum doesn't go into this. So Portal Antiquities data does go into it, British Museum doesn't. That's because British Museum didn't think the model was very good, so they didn't push their data forward. Now, in terms of academic numismatic facilities, there's the ANS website, the American Numismatic Society in America. Now, they are also pushing the boundaries of numismatic research in terms of how they present data online. With them, we're working on protocols to try and make recording easier, to make people do the same thing. This is another resource in Germany called Numismatics. Now, I think the funding for this has now ceased, so this is probably sitting there mothballed, just got data on it. I don't know how many people are using it. And there's other website resources as well. Most of them are Roman-based, the big ones. This is Online Coins of the Roman Empire. This launched last July. It's growing, and it's using different technologies to try and amalgamate data. So how do you pull data together? There's a couple of protocols that people use to try and share data. Now, this method, OAI, PMH, which stands for Open Archives Initiative, I can't remember what the next bit stands for, metadata harvesting. Now, this is the way that you can actually push your data into other repositories. So this is what the CCI does, the EMC, and Portal Antiquities does to Europeana. So at the background, Europeana queries your database using that protocol, and sucks the data out, and then pulls it into their database. They don't take any other interpretation, they just take the data. So it's just a simple data exchange. And then there's other ways of sharing data. There's NUDS, Numismatic Database Standard. Now, this was actually worked out in this room here about 5 years ago. It's a meeting funded by the AHRC, and it's used by 2 databases. Hardly anyone's using this at the moment, but there's more people subscribed to it now, and I think there's going to be 5 more databases subscribing to actually start using this soon. This is called XML. This is just a raw data format. In this, you can have links to files, you can describe data, you can say where things are going, how many objects there are, who the issuer is, all this information. And that data can be consumed by a third party and repurposed to show on their website. So I use that sort of information to drive certain things on the Portal Antiquities website. We record objects from all sorts of people, from kings, from emperors, from doges. You have to think about where things come from. But I decided that we needed some background information because lots of people using our website aren't specialists. Where do they get background information about these people? So originally, we had some interns based in the basement here who go through books and write biographies. And I thought, what a waste of time after about the 60th one had been done. These people were just going to Wikipedia and encyclopedias and regurgitating information that's already out there. So why don't I just try and get the information from Wikipedia? And you can do this quite simply. So what I've done here is Ethelred the Unready. I've just taken from Wikipedia the abstract from the text and the image. Now, if you see problems with Wikipedia, you can now go and edit those bits of data, and that instantly updates this as well. Wikipedia's improved a lot. It's not problem-free, and I wouldn't say it's the best academic resource to edit everything, but the abstracts are usually the most accurate bit of those records. So if you do see something wrong, just go and change it, and then it updates our website, and it updates the ANS's website, and it updates a few others that are now doing the same thing. But you can get all sorts of information back from there. So when that person died, who their father was, who their mother was, where they died, where they fought battles. So all this information can be pulled out of DBpedia if it's there. And then I've also done some interesting stuff in the background to try and make things work and teach people how to record coins. I've linked things together so that people can't make mistakes. Now, Caroline has been in our database and recorded some coins. So she might know what the denomination of the coin is. She can go onto our database, she's recording the coin. She clicks on that denomination, and then it tells her who the issuers could be for that denomination, which narrows her choices down. So she's looking through her books, and she works out it's Hadrian, and so you click on Hadrian. And then you think, I don't know what mints there are for him. It gives you a list of the mints that are available, so it gives you more choices to narrow it down. The same thing happens for medieval numismatics and early medieval numismatics. We now have an overarching category, which is the same as the EMC's list. You click on that category, it then gives you the issuers for that period. It also then, once you click on the issuer, goes for the mints, denomination, and types, and sometimes money if we've got that data. So those drop-downs are then reconfigured, and they drive those pages that I showed you earlier. So on this page, we've got a list of the denominations that person issued, the mints that they issued from, the types, and the categories. And that all comes from this. So I'm repurposing data backwards and forwards through our website for various different uses and trying to show people what they're searching for. And this again goes through into the search engine. I try and lead people's searches as well. Now, even though I'm leading them, this doesn't catch the mistakes, which are there from old data. So let's say someone choosing the Aureus and they've attributed it to Elizabeth I. They're not going to find it that way. So they have to use it as free text to find those sort of mistakes. Or different bits of our website can show that up. Now, this is the most important thing if you're ever going to build a database. Standards are the key to unlocking data. You should all do the same thing as each other and reference the same idea. So let's go back to the ancient world and think about places and names of places. Now, think about, say, Athens. It could have had different names in the past. So in some databases, people put the classical name, some people put the modern name, some people put it in Greek. So what makes it easier is to reference a URL or a resource. So let's say Athens is given the number 1 and has got a URL string before it. If everyone puts number 1 as their ID for Athens, then when you come to amalgamate your databases, it's much easier to bring them together. If you're doing it by a place name, it's much harder. Which then allows you to build linked data models, or the XML that I mentioned earlier. So this is something from Numisma, which is run by the American Numismatics Society in New York. Okay, just down here, you've got coin type with an ID number. So instead of giving a text identifier, they give it a URL string. So we know that they're talking about the same thing. So in your database, you say that coin type has also got that ID and walk backwards and forwards between databases. It's probably hard to get your head around at the moment, but okay. So this is Rome here, and these are two different databases using the same ID for Rome. This is the Port Antiquities one, and this is the Numisma in America. So you can see that they've both got commonality. So they're both referencing the same place. You did a search on Rome, it pulls back all the data for both databases in one go because they're using the same ID. It's very easy to now amalgamate those databases and harmonize data, which makes it easier for you as a researcher. So let's think about, you've got data in the Fitzwilliam, the Penn, the BM, and Ashmolean, and you want to bring it all together in one go. In the future, this is going to happen because we're all going to be talking the same language. And you do a query to all those data sets in one place, and it pulls that data back, and you can reuse it. So how do you move outside numismatic silos? Well, it's very much like museums and education. There's always these little groups that work by themselves and don't talk to each other, or don't want to share data. So you've got to spread the word about how things are getting out there. How can you reuse data and do different things? Now, how many of you are using social media? They're all very useful formats for disseminating information. Now, these images I put out on Flickr about a year ago. Now, Ellie was a work experience student. She was 15. She'd never seen gold coins before. She came downstairs and Sam got a tray out and showed her. So we put that image up afterwards to show what she did for her work experience. That was then shown to her school headmaster, who was really enthused about the fact that she came somewhere and actually did something interesting rather than just stacking shelves or data entry. She did do data entry, but we didn't tell him that. Have you met either of these two? Richard Abdi, he's based down in the basement. Sam, those two count grotty coins constantly, so we take a picture of what they're doing. We're showing how numismatists work. Then there's the Hackney gold coins, which we found in Hackney, as the name suggests, in London. That's quite an interesting case for the media to jump on. By putting these images out on social media with a very liberal license, the public could download these images and reuse them for their own blogs, for news articles. These images here featured on BBC News, they featured in the Times, just because we put them on there and actually hadn't got restrictive licensing, because we wanted people to know about them. We make these images available in reasonable format sizes. They're not at the highest resolution possible, but they're about 300 dpi. They're good enough for you to reuse for publication for small run print books. And you can reuse images in different websites as well. So this is an example of Numisma in America that I mentioned earlier. And they wanted to find examples of coin types that they got in their list. So what I did is I tagged some images on Flickr with a certain string. They then did a search in the background, and it pulls back the images that have been tagged in that way off Flickr and puts them back on their website. So they've enriched their resource just by one simple call to one website. Facebook and Twitter I just mentioned. Now, we're not attracting a huge audience on Facebook or Twitter. The British Museum doesn't have a huge audience on Facebook or Twitter. It's got about 300,000 followers on Facebook and about 160,000 on Twitter. The population of this country is 66 million. So are we actually reaching a huge audience? No, we're not. But we're reaching a certain interested audience in many ways. These people who are using social media usually follow museums because they are interested. But they might retweet that message or share that message with their friends who aren't actually that interested in museums, but suddenly think, wow, that's cool. So this and this are the same thing. I put them on two different formats of media to find out how many people looked at them. And we got different reactions. So on this one, you can see it's mostly our staff that actually commented. On the other one, they don't work for us. I've got no idea who they are either, but they showed an interest. And then we actually give information to Wikipedia directly as well. I've got a couple of tame Wikipedians. Now, when the Froome Hoard came out, I emailed them the day before and said, would you fancy writing an article about the Froome Hoard with some accurate information that we'd already got? And the chap said, yes, I'll do it by the morning. He'd actually done it by 5 past midnight, and I sent it to him about 11 o'clock. And he used our images, he used the excavation report, and he actually produced a really good resource. We gave them some images via Flickr with open license. They uploaded them to Wikipedia Commons. So those images now appear in Wikipedia. They've got accurate information. Now, let's think about a different thing. Now, you're using websites, and how do you normally find information without actually going to them? You use Google. Does anyone use Bing? No. Yahoo? No. Right, so how do you make sure that information is available to other people? Well, you have to make sure it's search optimized. As time goes by, search engines get more and more sophisticated. They can work out different things. Many old websites are being penalised now because they've got old-style tags in the background. They haven't got the right format for actually pulling data out. So this is an example. I did a search for an Aureus of Nero in Cornwall. The top records that came back were ones off our website, the Portal Antiquities scheme, because I've search optimized the way that our language is written, how the content's presented. And you can actually see it tells you what you search for and who identified these coins as well. It's just by writing simple semantic HTML. But numismatics and coins have a very low visibility on the web generally. You do a search for them, there's not huge amounts of results of academic institutions. Do a search for numismatics, and what comes top? Wikipedia. What comes second? Wikipedia again. Third? Another Wikipedia entry. Fourth? The RNS. Now, how many people remember the RNS? Do a search for coins. What comes top? The Royal Mint. Why have they come top, though? Because they paid Google for a link. So, if you want to pay for links, you can do, but I don't think it's very effective. Do you ever click on those paid for links? I've never clicked on one. The next entry for coins is actually coin on Wikipedia. So generally, coins and numismatics aren't very well represented with the institutions that actually know lots about them. It's third parties that are at the top at the moment. Now you guys could change that by writing good content in the future and publishing on the web. So what has got high visibility? Well, there's a few things that you could do a search for. We're really optimized for our stuff. So if you do a search for Greek and Roman provincial coins, we come out top. If you do a search for Roman coins, we were top, but Wikipedia's pushed us off again. It varies day by day depending on how people are clicking on the links and how long they spend on the site. Google's algorithm in the background is very sophisticated. It works in different things. It works out how many people have clicked on certain pages, and then it weights the objects as well. Early medieval coins, well, we come after Martin's website, which is probably right because you are the early medieval coin corpus. We're a multiple period database, so you have to think about why things might not come out. I mentioned earlier about analysing your content as well. So some poor chap did a search for Iron Age coins in Lincolnshire. He's sitting in the basement now, typing away. And he spent 2 hours, 26 minutes viewing our website. And he looked at 186 pages. Now, did he find what he was looking for? I'm not really sure. It's Ian, I never know what he's really looking for. So I can see what people are looking at by the search term that they came through on. So Roman coins, this is just a week's snapshot. There were 7,000 visits of people looking up after searching for Roman coins. They looked at 8.7 pages per visit. And they spent about 5 minutes on a website. Now, that's actually quite good. Most people spend about 30 seconds looking at a web page. They don't read the whole thing. We do user studies where people scan them. You see that they don't read them in a normal way. I work with the web, but I still find it much easier to download something and print it if I actually want to read a really in-depth article. I think many people will. So if you publish stuff online, do make sure you can take it away in a format that people might read it later. Don't make it so you can't print, which some websites are starting to do. And I mentioned that every single link is available from this website. I've mentioned everything that I've talked about is on this link. So if you want to see what I've been talking about, they're there. I've actually finished a bit early.
This talk was recorded on the 17th of July 2013 for the Money and Metals Network by Robert Bracey. It was edited by Robert Bracey and Ben Alsop.